Good afternoon, everyone. This broadcast will start in about 1 minute. Okay, we'll start this off. Welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us here today for today's webinar from the Institute of Asset Management, and this is from the Munster branch in the south of Ireland. My name is Conor Cooney. I'm co-chair with Orla Newman on the IAM Munster committee, which was only just launched last January. I'm also the Associate Director with ARUP, and I'm leading the Asset and Facilities Management team within ARUP. So today's discussion is about going beyond compliance and statutory maintenance in the water industry. So what we learned from here today are that these principles can be applied across all sectors. It's not specific by any means to the water industry, and can be applied across many others. The Institute of Asset Management Munster Committee, I suppose, were very keen to keep the momentum going that we had commenced last January, when we had a formal launch at one of the offices where we had 50 attendees, I think, from recollection. So I suppose we believe that we want to keep that going, keep the network going, and an opportunity for everybody to actually kind of learn and listen from each other and to share ideas around that. So here are some of the committee members: so Diarmaid Cuallain, myself, Orla Newman, John Collins, Ken Gorman, Cliona Downs, and Owen Ryan. So our plan, I suppose, over the next few months is to continue with these events, something on a 3-monthly basis, and to bring a wide range of topics from kind of strategic, tactical, and operational level. There'll be a lot of technical, there'll be a lot of different topics, different levels, to suit all of our members. So the agenda today, I suppose, we're actually going to have a quick opening here from myself, and I'll be introducing Ian Gray. Ian then will give a discussion on going beyond compliance in the water industry, at which point then we'll have a quick Q&A session, which Owen Ryan will facilitate, before introducing Jim Fitzgerald. So Jim then, from Irish Water, is going to give an overview on statutory maintenance, at which point then Owen again will facilitate a question and answer session at the end of that, and then introduce Orla Newman, who's our co-chair, and also Orla will give a quick overview of what's happening coming down the road, and going to close out after that. If you have any questions, can we suggest that you would use the control panel on the right hand side, where you can actually type these questions in. This helps us kind of control the questions, and people can like the questions, and it goes up the pecking order. And if we do run out of time in any particular area, we do have the opportunity where we can kind of record these questions and come back to people afterwards and address those, so that we have a bit of a white paper to present. So I'm going to introduce Ian Gray. So Ian is an advisory consultant, leads strategic work on many challenging projects. Ian has 30 years experience in multi-sector environments, and also brings in a wealth of international experience. He's only just told us he's just off the phone from Australia, and these sectors across in asset management in water, light rail, highways, ports, and many other sectors. So Ian, I'm going to hand it over to you, and if you want to present your screen there.
Brilliant. I'll just get that organised. Right, thank you. Screen 2. So you should be able to see that screen hopefully now.
Yep.
So thanks a lot for the invite today. Asset management's a passion of mine, as you can imagine. I suppose what Connor didn't quite mention as well, I'm ex-chair of the Institute of Asset Management for the UK. So I'm still on the UK panels and I've spent many, many years working with organisations, working in organisations to help them understand asset management and the reach and benefit that they can actually take from it. So what I wanted to share today was just a little bit of insight of going beyond compliance, because compliance in the water sector is a given. You know, that's a license, that's what you need to do. Going beyond that is the challenge, driving efficiency and effectiveness. The first slide, just to support that, is just the journey for England and Wales. If you don't mind, I apologise for sort of using this. I'll use England and Wales as a reasonable example of an evolution, if you like. So over the last 30 years, they privatised the industry in England and Wales, the water industry. For good or bad, or whatever the way you look at that, to me, it's just a way of funding what needs to be done, and how they behave is really important. But what it has done is invested nearly 160 million steadily over those 30 years. Now, what that really means is that you've got another 160 million pounds worth of assets on top of what you had, or replacing what you had, 60 billion, sorry, which is a massive amount of things to actually manage much more effectively. Hence, that's driven a change in the way the organisations have had to look at asset management. The benefits of this, you know, going back to the 1990s, and fortunately or unfortunately, I was there at the time. You know, we've got customers now enjoying access to world-class drinking water, so that you don't worry about what comes out of the tap. Leakage on those networks is down by a third since the mid-1990s. The beaches are now classed as excellent, with less than a third 25 years ago. And also the environment, which is, you know, the water companies being custodian of the environment per se, the wildlife's return to rivers, which have been dead since post the Industrial Revolution. Now that is really important in terms of the overarching benefits that the water industry plays a part in for customers and the environment and society as a whole. It's an essential requirement for life, isn't it? And that was a statement that I picked up from publication from Water UK. So thinking about the actual journey, then I'm just going to turn that off so you can focus on that. Over 30 years have been increasing maturity in asset management. The early 90s were all about big capital investment, very focused on the CapEx side of things. The operational side was just trying to be done as efficiently as possible, still putting these AMP periods, asset management planning periods, 5-year periods together, about understanding what their needs were and driving that forward. But predominantly it was overpowered by the millions and billions of pounds worth of investment needed to make. As that evolution has continued on, there's been a continuous challenge around really understanding the assets and the value they actually bring. That was then a publication called PAS 55, which was the forerunner to ISO 55000 in around 2002, was actually brought into play. And at the same time, the industry, the water industry, developed something called a common framework, and that was for capital maintenance planning. So what you need to invest in your assets optimally across its life cycle to make sure you're efficient, effective, and you balance proactive and reactive sort of activities. In AMP4, then there was starting to look at a focus on TOTEX. So instead of having the CapEx budget or buckets and the OpEx buckets, and individually those managed and driven efficiency, starting to look at the whole life cycle costing of the asset base and how you manage that based on new stuff that was coming in, but also managing your base operational requirements. That then started to get the industry thinking more and more, and start to increase that sort of what was the approach to managing those assets more effectively. So the regulators brought in an approach called Asset Management Assessment, AMA, And that helped inform and score points to show how well an organisation was performing in terms of, do they really understand the assets and what they need to invest in. And they also started to bring in a measure around serviceability. In AMP6, there was absolute step change in the industry. So very focused on outcomes for customers. So it wasn't about, did I know my assets and do I know how much I need to invest in them? It was basically, what level of leakage is acceptable? What do I need to do to achieve that level of leakage? What statutory requirements for treatment? How do I actually achieve that treatment? What about foul flooding? So these measures of success were then established, and the water companies then had to use good asset management practice to make sure they had an optimal solution to deliver the outcomes for the customers. In AMP7, and this is the focus area, so I'd like to move on to, which is around, you take where we are in terms of being compliant and exploiting things like ISO 55000 as a system. What are the things then to go beyond compliance that you would actually need to do? So I put this up because compliance, it's quite easy to be compliant. And those of you that are either work as endorsed assessors or assess organizations in terms of their maturity, and what I've shown on the left there is the maturity of asset management assessment, self-assessment methodology against having a system in place and the processes in place and then being in use. It's great, and you'll all understand and know that you can have some really great processes, but actually whether the organization and people actually exploit them and actually drive better performance out of it and continuously improve, all the systems in the world and the processes in the world aren't actually going to make you anything more than just compliant with a system. And this change process and understanding continuous improvement, so what's driving change, understanding the organizational context, understanding what then you've got in place and what you would need to improve, that then allows you to develop the change program. Now, this is sort of, if you're moving towards ISO 55000, but in terms of delivering this at the back end as well, in terms of driving sustainable benefits, is that you want to nail as much as you can as business as usual, and then start to look at these areas where you've got more difficult things you need to use and look at and consider to start to outperform, so to go beyond just compliance. So the very fundamental of asset management is around de-risking or managing your asset management in a risk-based context. So understanding that you need to be compliant, need to be legally compliant, but then how do you actually outperform as an organization? So we all know these benefits across the life cycle. So what we're finding is that these are being lived out. There's some key areas that I just wanted to focus on, which is around the total cost across the whole life cycle, and why isn't TOTEX actually landing in organizations really effectively? And also looking at longer term planning and resilience. So what are the shocks and stresses? We all know it's a changing world. We all know that there's a level of uncertainty. What are the no regrets decisions you can make, and how could you approach that? How could you build that into your business as usual decision making processes? All of these things here are what you get from actually doing very good standard asset management approach that makes sure that we've got the right resources in place, make sure that we actually can demonstrate compliance. We're managing our risk effectively. So what would it feel like to be in an organization with a truly well managed risk? How many organizations do you know that spend a lot of their time in the gold room dealing with events that are actually keeping them away from actually doing the basics and what they should be doing, and actually creating space for innovation and change? So as I said before, I just want to focus on two examples of outperformance and focus that England Wales have been looking at. And this isn't everything, it's just I've selected two examples that are quite challenging. So in terms of TOTEX, there's, as I said, back in AMP 4, 5 and 6, then the actual idea of bringing together TOTEX, and they also use BOTEX for existing assets, so base operating total expenditure and total expenditure for new assets, and the way they bring that down. But it is that combined investment around operating and capital investment. How do you bring that in a balance? How do you get flexibility between the budget headings in there? How do you trade off your capex to your opex, or vice versa, in a way that's acceptable and built into your decision-making processes? And that really starts to give you extended opportunities to actually drive better, longer-term decisions in the organisation in the context of the regulatory environment. So we undertook this work with several water companies and Ofwat to say, right, okay, let's look at where we are and what sort of things could actually enhance our TOTEX approach going forward. So we looked at a set of questions which are around the whole life cycle maturity. So how was TOTEX actually brought in? And you can see these sort of questions are quite broad in terms of they're not a direct, have you got your power costs? Have you got your other operational costs? Have you got your maintenance cost in there? What it's looking at is where those costs are across the life cycle, and also some behavioural things as well. So looking at incident event-based maintenance. So how do you actually respond? Are you very responsive in the way you actually respond to events? Are you effective in managing that? Do you learn from that? Is that played back into how the optimal way you should look after those assets? How much planned maintenance is in there? How is that optimized? Looking at what information you base your decisions on, making sure that you're building your real-time information, your operational technology and information that's coming back through into your control room, and integrating with your IT information to look at holistically across the whole life cycle to help you make those investment decisions in the round. So making sure then the processes are in place for asset investment, looking at the level of sophistication of deciding when the level of improvement in asset maintenance and renewal. So at what point do you actually take an asset out of service and either repurpose it or dispose of it? Do you extend life and continuously manage the risk associated with that? Stakeholder engagement was really important. So actually looking at the stakeholders internally and externally to communicate the changes. So that then linked to making sure customers and how they understood that how their money was going to be invested in a more optimal way across the whole life cycle. So it wasn't just about building stuff, it was about actually operating, maintaining and owning these things in a much more effective way, and the choices customers could help them to make. And then measuring performance. So how did you actually check post the investment plan that your TOTEX estimation was actually being lived out in real life? So there's a lot of other things in there in terms of the angles we actually looked at. So what did we find? Then from the several organisations we've worked with, there was a clear, good understanding of the basic principles, so tick. The leadership teams were using the approach to inform their decision making, so they were using that process to inform what they did invest in, what they did on a year-on-year basis. There was understanding of the actual life cycle cost was very variable between organisation. So the quantity or quality of the information was quite sparse. A lot of it was quite sort of in chunks rather than broken down that you could tie back to asset groups or asset installations, so that you could actually look at whole life cycle costs. And the operational and maintenance practice was continued to evolve. So there was a lot of effort going into proactive maintenance, so RCN and various other methodologies, but it wasn't sort of BAU. It was still more reactive than planned in a number of cases. This approach in terms of sort of more moving more into effective maintenance to actually reduce risk, so risk-centered maintenance, rather than just passing that across into CapEx. Managing risk in different ways was an evolving feast as well. So also that there was a lot of outsourced arrangements, so either from outsourcing maintenance, outsourcing operations to outsourcing capital investment. and actually aligning that to their organisation, to the company's organisation, understanding TOTEX was work in progress. Still a challenge to embed behaviours in the existing workforce, and that was predominantly around the engineering and operations and maintenance teams, because just of their past practice and trying to change what they did and what they should do, and that sort of working between different parts of the organisation. Risk-based decision-making approaches taking time to embed. So again, changing working practice, but also changing the way people understood and perceived how they made decisions, and trying to get that optimal across departments. Linking that, what I talked about, IT-OT interface. So what we were finding was that there was some really good practice around that interconnectivity of exploiting data from an IT or an OT world. And we can see a lot of that evolving now, where using sort of key performance indicators and triggers and trends to actually inform what you do next is definitely improvement as digital transformation is taking hold in the industry. Customer outcome-based thinking is maturing, so focusing on outcomes. So if an example would be, litres not meters, so replacing enough pipe to achieve the leakage targets. Understanding how all of the different component parts of what the customer promises were, and how whatever the activities were undertaken within the investments or the activities around maintenance or operations were all linked to achieving that outcome. So very focused on customer outcomes. That was still maturing though. Ownership model, we found, did impact on the approaches. And as you can imagine, just the different way in that the organisations were funded, whether it be sort of a limited company or whether it not for profit or whether it be wholly owned, each of those were driving slightly different behaviours based on the ownership and their perception of what was the right thing to do. So that was TOTEX. So TOTEX is a moving piece. It's the nirvana of asset management, isn't it? We get that right, we're doing really well. The next thing is around resilience. So what I've put together a number of slides here that are around just explaining the different thinking that's gone on around trying to bring resilience into these asset management companies. So resilience, this thinking here came from city resilience. So work we've done with many cities around the world who actually originally started with looking at where they'd had disasters and disaster recovery. And working with the Rockefeller Foundation, we ended up developing a methodology that would help redesign cities to build their resilience to different shocks and stresses into the future. So rather than wait for things to happen and respond or recover, then actually design a resilient city. So we've taken that, working with the responsibility that Ofwat had in terms of resilience, to work with water companies, and this original methodology here was developed with Anglian Water to look at resilience in the round. And each of these are interdependent. So as we know from asset management perspective, we look at not just how you manage your assets and how you operate across the life cycle, but how that's governed, and also how that's funded, and how you can show transparency in that funding. So from a resilience perspective, what we wanted to do was make sure that we got a model that said where all of that good practice would sit to what a resilient organisation would look like, with the customers and the environment at the centre of that, and then look at all of the interdependencies between each of these functions to make sure that they could actually deal with the shocks and stresses that could be put their way. One of the core elements of that was systems thinking, and this is an example working again for the last review, working with the Yorkshire Water to look at system interdependencies. So if you apply a stress or a shock to a core system, then what are the other systems that would be either impacted on or would impact on that core system? So you can start to look at the leading lag indicators in that. So this is absolutely a hot agenda now for this for the next 5 years, in trying to build a good understanding of system interdependencies. And the importance of this is because of the aspects of looking where where the resilience dividend can sit. So doing one action that has multiple benefits across the whole organization and external bodies and external parties. So what you can control, what you need to work with others on is very important. Systems thinking underpins all of that. Building resilience into asset management then becomes the next step. So how do you make decisions? How do you build resilience decision making into basic risk-based decision making? Bearing in mind that what probably you're going to be looking at is low likelihood, high impact stresses over the longer term, shocks and stresses. So how do you build that in? Because that's like a disconnect to a standard risk model. So this modeling approach, building that back into the ISO 55000 system, so making sure you've got clear strategy and policies and plans and information management and organization support systems in place become really important to embed this into the organization. Last but not least is around ensuring long-term resilience through asset health. So you can build new stuff, you can extend things, duplicate it, but if you're not looking after the basics, then all of that could be basically wasted because you're relying on assets that are going to underperform or not provide the service that you actually want. So we've been looking through an asset health lens, an asset resilience lens, to look at underlying asset health, looking at asset-related risk, building that understanding of resilience into the future for the assets also designed now, the medium and long term, and then also looking at long-term planning. So if that's the understanding of what you need, how do you actually build out those longer term needs into future plans so that you can actually build that longer term requirement through the assets. So making sure that the deterioration of your asset base doesn't create a problem, and also that longer term investment in changing of assets to meet future demands and future scenarios then is really important. So hopefully what I've gone through there is going beyond compliance. So getting your systems and processes in place will help you be stop underperforming because you've got a consistent way of doing that, but that only takes you to compliance. And what I really want to do is look through your organization and your people and adaptation of your systems to actually deliver outperformance in the organization you work for. And I think I'm about a minute ahead of time. So thank you. Would you like to move on to questions?
Hi, thanks very much, Ian, for a very interesting presentation. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Owen Ryan. I work in the Irish Water Asset Planning section, and I'm a founding member of the Institute of Asset Management Munster branch. It looks like we don't have any questions at the moment, so what I could do is I could run the poll, and if anyone has any questions, if you could quickly type it into the questions box. And in the meantime, we'll be running a poll, and the poll is, I'll just launch it now. It's about our next event. So the question is, would you be interested to join post-event breakout groups for specific topic discussions and networking at future Munster branch IAM events? So I'll launch that poll now. It should appear on your screen. So I think this is going to go for about 30 or 45 seconds. So I see the votes coming in now. Okay, so that vote was successful. So we had 70% of people who voted to take part in breakout sessions and networking at future IAM events. Check if there's any questions coming through. So
looks like you've got a scot-free.
So there's a question here, it's a very short one, in relation to chemical systems. I don't know, Ian, will you be able to make sense of that question if you could maybe provide some insight into that?
Could you just read it out to me because I can't quite see it on here?
Yeah, it's a very short question, actually. I'm not too sure if some of it got cut off. It just says relation to, oh, sorry. Sorry, I just have to expand the screen here. Yeah, so this is from Rachel O'Connor. Is there a specific software or program you can use to identify interdependencies on slide 12? Would you like me to repeat that?
Yeah, please. Sorry, interdependencies with?
Is there a specific software or program you're using to identify interdependencies on slide 12?
Yeah, I mean, there's several pieces of software you can use. You can use anything from Excel spreadsheets. I had worked with somebody who was actually looking at system interdependency for brain surgery and was using a spreadsheet on that. There's some really interesting software emerging around using nodal software, which then interconnects a bit like modeling software. That there's economic modeling, but there's designed in and built the different attributes and different levers you would pull. So there's quite a few pieces out there, but there's no one quite cracked it yet. There was a big national study done around big systems like UK-wide systems interdependency between all of the different markets. So there is one which is Riverlogic that I've seen, which is quite handy and being run by a company called BMA, and that's a very good start. But to be fair, at the beginning you can quite quickly generate it through just basic sort of Excel spreadsheets and interconnectivity if you want to just start the journey.
Great, thanks very much. This is the question that I thought was cut off. So this question is, can ARC provide specific services in relation to chemical systems? That question is from Paul Hickey.
As in design of chemical systems, like any organization, you can design and optimize chemicals. So based on a combination of the processes, the requirements, so redesigning the process. I think one of the important things to look at on that is trying to look at what are sustainable chemicals as well. So what the industry is looking at, if you look at COVID and the reliance heavily on particular chemicals, and that was actually going to potentially scupper the ability to treat water. So actually looking holistically around the chemical use, chemical dosing approaches, then yeah, that's something that certainly we can do, and probably a number of other consultants can do. Sorry, couldn't hear you then.
The next question is from Brantford Warner. Can you outline what steps you take in understanding resilience? Can you outline what steps you take in understanding resilience?
Yeah, so there's a few. It depends where you want to start, which aspect you look at. The resilience in the round is an approach to look at organizational resilience, and where we start with that is understanding the organization, understanding against the headings that I showed you on that methodology. And it's a maturity assessment approach that really helps to see whether you've got the right components in place. Post that, then what we looked at, so going into PR19, which is the plan for 2020 to 2025 in England and Wales, we worked with several organisations to understand and benchmark their approaches to resilience using that framework. We then worked with them to do, from that framework, where the gaps were, level of maturity, to identify what their planned activities would be to improve their resilience thinking. So that then enabled them to actually design and build a plan that was then submitted to Ofwat to actually have a plan for improving resilience thinking within their organisation. So that's from an organisational perspective. At an asset level, then you can use a analysis approach techniques across whole systems and systems interdependencies. And what we've done with a number of companies is then look at whole system analysis. So all of a water system for a water company, looking where those, looking at identifying particular shocks and stresses that could actually impact them on them now, and then looking where those pinch points would be created in that system, which then identified where the investment requirements will actually come from that. So you've got two different styles of taking either organizational resilience or basically asset resilience. And then, as we put up there, that decision-making process, the challenge that we found was trying to get longer-term challenges, shocks and stresses, aging infrastructure and things like that. How do you build that into and prioritize those investments over things that are here and now that have sort of high impact, high likelihood scenarios that actually then would take majority of the investment requirement? How do you balance that and optimize it against the longer term requirements? Does that answer the question?
It does, yeah. So the next question is from Damien Lillard. Can you provide more detail on statutory risk management in the UK?
Yeah, so there's compliance around environmental compliance, so all of that statutory requirements defined. There are a massive amount of other standard requirements, anything from lifting equipment right the way through to power systems, etc., etc. So there's a lot of statutory requirements that are built into the asset health, and that's built into their asset management plans that are around. So yeah, we can provide some more information on that.
Okay. And this is a follow-up to the question that Paul Hickey asked. The question relates to advice on specific standards and procedures, inspections of process chemical systems and tanks in the water, in the water industry.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, so in terms of standards and standard requirements, yes, I mean that is in terms of design requirements, sort of how you would need to integrate that into design. Yes, that's fairly routine activity.
Great. I think that's the end of the questions, and that just neatly brings us up to shortly coming to 21, and we're due to have Jim Fitzgerald. So we'll be having some technical difficulties in the background, which we've been resolving. I think Jim should be on the line. Maybe if Jim, please, if he can hear us and we can hear him.
Yeah, I can hear you, Owen. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Yeah, great, Jim. Thanks.
Perfect.
So Jim Fitzgerald has over 30 years experience in the water industry, both in Ireland and internationally, in engineering management and the many aspects of asset management. Jim is one of Irish Water's asset operations service level agreement leads for the southern region, which is over 50% of the Irish Water assets. His role includes the oversight of the effective provision of operational services on water and wastewater assets in the southern region, in line with the annual service plans. Jim has worked on the Irish Water Programme for the establishment of the organisation and continues to take a leading role in continuous improvement projects such as standardisation of statutory maintenance and energy management. Prior to this, Jim was involved as an engineering manager for engineering consultants, both internationally and in Ireland. Jim is a Bachelor of Engineering and Civil Engineering from University College Cork and is a fellow for Engineers Ireland. And I personally like to thank Jim for agreeing to undertake this presentation, and particularly for bearing with us this morning as we have many IT issues going on in the background. So I'll hand you over now, Jim.
Okay, thanks, Owen. Hopefully I can. I'm not sure if you're able to see my screen now. Can you see it?
I can see it, yes.
Can you actually see the? Sorry, I'm not actually seeing it myself. 1 second now.
I can see the first slide, Statutory Maintenance Irish Water Overview.
Okay, no problem. I'll try and I just need to be able to see it myself. 1 second now.
Okay, take your time.
Okay, thanks very much, and apologies for having difficulty getting in. I'm on my third laptop now, so the first two didn't work, couldn't get in, and hopefully on the third one, and it's my daughter's one that she bought yesterday, so hopefully I don't break it between now and the end of the presentation. What I hope to go through today is just an overview of the Irish Water's situation to do with statutory maintenance. They say you should start every presentation with a hook or something, so I have a hook or a shackle there at the very top that hopefully you can see. But being serious, in terms of chains and shackles, we would have about 35,000 of these assets that need to have statutory maintenance every year. So I might just give you a bit of a background of, just trying to get my screen to, sorry, apologies, I didn't move there. So just trying to give you an idea of the assets that Irish Water have to look after at the moment. In the middle here, you'll see there's about 750 water treatment plants, 1,500 reservoirs, nearly 2,000 pump stations. And on top of that, then we've got about 1,100 wastewater treatment plants and 2,200. So when you add those together, that's about 7,500 sites that have assets on them, all of which will need statutory maintenance. These sites are run are operated at the moment by 31 separate local authorities under 31 separate service level agreements. So there's actually very few Irish Water staff would ever be on the sites because they're run by the local authority. Just move down. All right, and first of all, so you'd wonder why we bother doing statutory maintenance. Why don't we just wait for items to fail and see and fix them at that stage? Well, there's two main reasons. One is that we have a legal requirement, and the second is we have a duty of care to make sure that our assets don't cause harm to the 4,000 people that would be out on site. There's various regulations that have been set up, a lot of them prior to Irish Water, to do with setting out why and when we have to do and what type of assets we have to actually inspect. So what I've produced there is just a part of the one to do with lifting. So every 6 months, the chains, hooks, shackles have to be inspected. The beams and lifting appliances every 12 months. There's other statutory instruments to do with pressure vessels, which was the SI 445, which we'll come to in a while. So just on this slide here, just giving some idea of different types of assets that might require it, from electrical panels to pressure vessels, fire, what Paul was talking about earlier, the chemical tanks and the shackles. Just looking at the electrical, there's others as well in terms of ATEX and gas, but I've just picked out a few here, and we'll probably talk mostly about the electrical pressure and lifting for this presentation. If we look at the electrical panels first, we have about 7,500 sites, as I mentioned earlier. Some sites might have one panel, some sites might have 20, depending on the different buildings and structures. If we said there was an average of 4 panels per site, that would give us 30,000 electrical panels that need statutory maintenance. If we decided we'd only do them every 5 years, that would be 6,000 a year. And if we decided we'd work for 40 weeks of the year and did 5 days a week for 40 weeks of the year, that would be 200 days of inspections. So that would mean every day for the next 5 years, we have to do 30 panel inspections just to stand still with the panels we have. That's not just 30 inspections, that's actually reports, sets of actions, and even if 10% of our panels need to be replaced, that would be 3 panels every day for the next 5 years that we have to actually look about replacing. By the time we get to the very last panel over here, the first panel will be crying out saying that it's been 5 years since we've been heading in any inspection. So you can see the task ahead of us in terms of other numbers. We might have 2,000 pressure vessels. We have 35,000 lifting appliances. Again, every site will have fire, and if every site had 2 chemical tanks, you're talking about 15,000 chemical tanks. So to set up an asset management plan, particularly for statutory inspections, we need to look at how Irish Water is set up and see, do we have the capabilities that are required for asset management? And we are set up very much in line with this. We have our asset strategy, our asset planning, asset operations, technical standards, our asset intelligence. Then we've got our supply chain and procurement, learning and development, and our monitoring, health and safety, and risk assurance. So rather than having just the systems in place and the different structures, we have to make sure we have the key people, because to do statutory maintenance on when we might be doing up to 70,000-80,000 inspections a year, we have to have a cross-functional approach, and we need to have all the different key people working together to be able to make this work. So what we did is we got together all the key stakeholders within Irish Water and had various workshops on how we would manage statutory maintenance. And we tried to put them in order of the sequence they'll be required throughout the project. So from the start, we have the HSQE, or the EHS team, will be responsible for telling us what assets need to be inspected and how often, and also keeping up to speed with current legislation in case anything changes. Asset planning then have two important functions. The first one is to look at the programs that we're going to set up. So maybe a lifting program, lifting or pressure and electrical panels, and then to actually look out to 5, 10 years, 15 years and get funding in place, because there's no point just getting funding in place for this year. We need to do it in terms of our investment cycles. The second important thing that asset planning will have to do is to provide the competent person that will, throughout the process, be able to give us our go and no go and direct the work as the reports come in. The operation planning specialist then, say where Lourdes Cashley is working at the moment, would take the programs that are designed by, say, Bill and Ross and his teams in asset planning, and would turn them into programs and manage contractors in terms of the inspection. We then obviously have the inspection contractor and the local authority who will be doing the work on the site. Regional ops need to be involved in terms of doing the remediation works and managing the capital maintenance budgets. Asset delivery will get involved because asset planning will direct work their direction. And then asset intelligence have a very important part to actually build up our asset base and to make sure that we have the correct assets in there. And I'll show you later how items come in and out of the thing. Workflow then will drive everything in terms of giving instructions to move from one stage to the next, and when the next planned maintenance is to come up. And then telemetry obviously have to be involved, because we don't want to be sending out work orders that are site is down when we've already decided to turn the site down for an inspection. So what we put together was just a simple storyboard first to say, first of all, just starting from the need to having the inspection contractor complete an inspection and come up with his recommendations. So again, it starts with HSQE deciding what needs to be done. It's then asset planning, set up the program, get the funding. Operations team under John Keenan and Lourdes actually set up the program. Asset intelligence work with them to decide, is it a 6-monthly inspection, a 3-year, or a 5-year inspection. Workflow then will instruct works to be done. The LA get involved. I'll just skip the next few there. They're ready to do with the work Michael O'Reilly is doing in terms of turning all our this into maximum, getting us fully set up. If I just move to number box 14 there, so the contractor inspects the sites, and if we do this just for one asset, excuse me, and assume then we just have to scale that up to 70,000. I know it's a big ask, but what we have to do is get it working for one asset, so one pressure vessel, one panel, or one set of lifting, and then we can repeat that just with more resources and more funding. So the contractor will come on site, and he might look and say that it's a pass, which is great, or there might be a different types of fail. It could be a fail where there's that the asset can stay and there's just remediation required. We have to replace the asset, or we need to remove the asset, or importantly too, we have to be able to, if something comes and there's an emergency, we need to have that as a call out as well. So looking just at the different cases and how we might deal with them. So the first one there is that the asset remains. So if you can imagine, it's a pressure vessel. So the contractor has inspected it and said that the pressure vessel can remain, but there may be a gauge or some remediation work necessary. So say Ross in this case would, and the pressure, or Damien and the electrical would look at the report that come in and would review and confirm who the work should go to. A lot of the remediation would end up going with the local authorities. So the local authorities would be given an instruction to repair a gauge or a number of items. They would complete it, close out the work order. That would bring another work order then for the inspection contractor to come back and to actually revisit the site and pass that item. We would hope it would never have a fail after going through all that work. any of you with your Lean Six Sigma hats on will be saying, well, surely you can do that, but that could be done a bit easier. And yes, you're right, we can do it easier. Before we improve the process, we have to make sure we've got one that works for us, and this works. Where we might look at doing is, if there's some issues like just replacing a valve or a gauge, and it's something that comes up fairly often, rather than having to get the LA to do it and then to get the inspection contractor to come back again, we might look at changing the system so that if we've got competency in our inspection contractor and trust that they're not trying to just generate work for themselves, they may come and actually find the fault, if it's a minor fault like a gauge, instruct themselves to do it and complete it out, so that we only have to go to the site once. So for when we've got so many asks on the local authorities to access the sites, and particularly now even in COVID, it would probably seem better that if we could do it some easier way. Another way might be to do with electrical inspections. A lot of times the temporary measures that come out of electrical inspection is that there's more signage needed. And at the moment, what we would do is we would put it up onto our safety management system, SIMS. The local authority would see it up there, would action it and close it out, and we'd measure and see how quick they're doing it. If it's signage, maybe we should be getting by agreement, having the inspection contractor to agree with the local authority to actually put the signage up themselves that day and close out that part of the item. The next case then is an asset that needs to be replaced. So again, say the pressure vessel, using that one, contractor says this pressure vessel can't be saved, it needs to be replaced. Ross Peglier would look at it and say, yeah, he agrees, send it to asset delivery. Alan Hackler, the team there, would actually get involved and replace that asset. But the most important step in this one is for asset intelligence. The original pressure vessel, which might have been number L100, needs to be is gone now. It needs to be taken out of the system, out of our asset database, and any planned maintenance involved in it needs to be removed. A new asset, L200, the new tank, needs to go in, and that new planned maintenance then start all over for that new asset. So this is just an example of when we did our first round of pressure vessels. There was 67 of them needed to be replaced. So this vessel here is a new one. So obviously this will be the L200 or whatever the new asset is, and the planned maintenance will start for that. And the old vessel number has to be gone and planned maintenance gone for that. So these then will go back into whether it's ever a 26 week for the external inspections, and maybe some 36 months, excuse me, and then 52 months maybe for some internal inspections. The final case then is if an asset needs to be removed. So the recommendation is this asset isn't required or shouldn't be there, and we should just remove it. Again, it comes in probably getting boring now, but we have to keep the same consistency. So we'll come back to the asset planning who will make the decision that yes, it needs to be removed. It will normally go to the local authority to remove it. And in this case, asset intelligence just need to remove that asset from the asset base in Maximo, and to cancel any future planned maintenance for that asset. So they were looking in theory at how we would set it up when we've got everything in Maximo. Obviously, we're working on schemes at the moment where we are doing statutory maintenance. So one of them here will be this is just a dashboard from, I think it was from last month, for the lifting appliances. So we've got, as you see at the top, we have 35,000 lifting appliances. 70% of them, or 77% of them, are inspected every 6 months. Some of the other would be 12 months. We have 32,000 here have passed, which is great. We're obviously concerned about the 3,000 that have failed. During COVID, we would have lost some time from March through to May, particularly when we had shutdown, of where we didn't remove and replace some of these assets. Obviously, we're picking that up again. So it is something that's constantly moving. If you've got 35,000, about 25,000 of them might be lifting shackles and chains that have to be inspected every 6 months. So if you look on the life cycle, then the asset life cycle, where we're operating in the statutory maintenance is very much coming out of the maintenance strategy. So it's at the top end of the curve here to do with the operating the asset, maintaining it, getting towards seeing how long can we extend the asset. If you look at some of the electrical panels, by the time they have their third inspection, they could be 15 years old, or they may have already been on site more than that. So, you know, we're looking at some stages, how long do we keep these assets? You know, what's our plan for decommissioning them and eventual disposal? So we don't really have much opportunity to influence or to improve the asset at that stage. However, the information we get from working in these, particularly with the failures and things, is leading us back to the start, where the opportunity does exist in terms of writing SOPs, new technical standards, so that the new technical choices and the new assets that we provide, we would hope would give us a better outcome. Also, there's some things that, you know, at the start here, do we need a new asset? And one, for example, is to do with chains. Most of the chains we have are, a lot of them anyway, are attached to pumps, and then they've got a shackle and they're attached to a lifting beam. The only time that pump is ever lifted is to inspect the chain every 6 months, and the shackle every 6 months, and the lifting beam maybe every 12 months. So this pump is sitting down in a wet well, working away, no problem. Modern pump, it doesn't need to be lifted, and we lift it every 6 months to look at the chain, to look at the shackle, and look at the beam. You know, we do get problems in operations, but sometimes the pumps don't seat back down properly, and we have to get a specialist crew in there. Maybe we should be looking at, do we need chains at all? Should we leave the pump down there and let the pump decide when it needs to be looked at, not lifted every 6 months to look at a chain? So it's just, as Trump said, it was just a thought. So statutory maintenance, it's part of the overall maintenance management strategy. We obviously have, you know, we might say we have 100,000 assets that need statutory maintenance. We may have another 500,000-600,000 that have other planned maintenance, and we need to work on all of them. But this is obviously one that we have a statutory requirement on. So anybody who would have been at any asset management training would be used to some of these phrases about an asset management plan should bring together and optimize all asset life cycles. People do asset management, and asset management is a journey, not a destination. So what I would say is Irish Water has started on the journey with statutory maintenance. We have people, processes, and system in place. As we get into it, we realise that the task ahead is huge. We need adequate budget and focused delivery teams to be able to deliver the task ahead. You can't have a presentation without asking for more money and more people. So finally, just looking back at the list of the assets again. So we went through the 7,500 sites. There are an awful lot of other assets, and if you look in the bottom right-hand corner there, you'll see the number of valves, which is over 500,000. Some of those valves are just sluice valves that are at the LAs on site, open and close every day or regularly, and there's no problem. A number of those, it could be 450 there, or it could be 2,000 of them, are business critical valves. They're ones that we are expecting to use to turn off when we need it, when there's an emergency, and it's usually 4 o'clock on a Saturday morning, when it never happens at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday. So we're expecting these valves to work. If we don't set planned maintenance for those valves and arrange that they're tested every 3 months, or we close them, or every 6 months, that, you know, expecting them to sit in the ground and wait for us when we're going to use them is going to bring problems. So hopefully that'll give you sort of a run through where we are with statutory maintenance, and might hand back now to Owen. Thanks very much for listening to me, and hopefully that made sense.
Yeah, thanks very much, Jim, for a very interesting presentation. A lot of our asset management presentations can be quite high level, given that we cut across many industries and sectors. But it was really great to see a practical example of applying asset management principles in real life. So I think we have a few questions coming already. So if you're ready for those, the first one is from John Coleman. And the question is, what systems do you use to maintain control of your assets, of your statutory equipment?
but the system that we're trying to put all assets into would be into Maximo, so that we would have, as I call it, an L number for every asset, so that and with that will be the information of the asset type, whether it's has statutory maintenance requirement, or whether it's just a normal asset that needs that's part of the manufacturer instructions that there's a planned maintenance. So it would be, most of it, our information is to try and get all our assets into Maximo, so from there we can give our work orders, and whether it's at whether it's a level 5 or level 7, but it will be in Maximo.
Great. The next question is from Dan O'Gorman. The question is, do you apply asset tags with GIAI to all the assets that need to be maintained based on a statutory requirement?
The hope is that we will have asset tags on all assets, new and people like Dermot Morahan and Derry Riley would have been going around in because we would have taken over the assets of the local authority, so we would have an asset tag on each of them. I'm not sure in terms of the question, and maybe somebody else on the call would from Asset Intelligence would know whether it's the GI or what the way the question was, but the plan is that all assets should be asset tagged, and the story or the asset plan maintenance behind that should be the same, whether it's a statutory or whether it's just a normal plan maintenance as per manufacturer's instructions.
Okay, if someone is on the call from AI, could it maybe type something in response to that into the questions box? The next two questions are from Cormac Bergen, and I think you touched on this a fair bit in the presentation, but I'll call them out anyway. The first was, is there a case to ask the HSA to view lifting chains inspections as a requirement to inspect is the bigger risk? And then he followed up by saying, just to follow up on my last question, in the UK, they don't need to lift chains, and this is agreed with the HSE in the UK. Can we do similar here?
Ideally, we'd love to do it. If you looked at the regulations, it says that in the regulations that they're every 6 months. The HSA, we would love, and I think we have had some discussions with them. There hasn't been much movement, and I agree. We should, lifting them every 6 months. We are creating, to lift a chain, you're creating a situation which could have a safety implication, because you're lifting, you have people working around the asset. It is something that I think we do need to go to the HSA again, and maybe even through the department, because most of these times the pumps, they're only lifted to inspect the chain, to inspect, we might even be better to say we won't inspect any chains, that every 5.5 months we'll just throw away the old chain and put on a new one, and have the serial number for the new one, because the cost of the chain is small compared to the cost of the inspections and the work sometimes we need with confined space teams to put the pumps back down again.
Okay. So there's a follow-up from an original question from Dan O'Gorman. So excellent presentation, very informative. In the case of Irish Water, does Maximo allow you influence the designers of new facilities based on total cost of ownership? Like, for example, not to use chains going forward.
I think the information that we're getting from all our inspections is feeding back into the technical specs and into the tech hubs that we have. So issues like that will be discussed at, and when we're doing some of our HAZOPs as well and things, we would be looking at that. So the technical standards and our asset management team in putting together their SOPs would be looking at that.
Okay. This is in relation to the asset tagging question from Michael O'Reilly. I didn't catch the reference in the asset tagging question. Was it GIA? I think the question was GIAI. You might come back to us on that, Michael. In the meantime, the next question is from Laura Moreno. Is your Maximo integrated with GIS?
I don't know the answer to that. I could say yes, but I might be wrong. So I don't have the answer to that.
Okay, possibly for Asset Intelligence to answer. We can follow up with more questions, the other answers.
No problem.
And Michael has said that Maximo is integrated with GIS.
Thanks, Michael. I'm glad I name dropped you in the middle of the presentation. So.
Excellent. So I think that's the end of the questions. Before I hand over, just like to kind of wrap up from my side. We were planning this event back in April, and we had the opportunity to get Ian Gray over from the UK, back in the old world of people flying in for talks and training sessions. And at that time, it was thought it was a good idea to, as he was talking about water industry, he thought it would be a good idea to get someone from Irishwater involved. So I approached Margaret Attridge, who kindly volunteered to present. So it's great that, despite the fact that we had to go virtual, that we're still able to get the presentation going. And I'd like to thank Conor and Ola for being very supportive when I came up with the idea of hosting this event virtually and kind of maintaining the momentum of the IAM Munster branch. And again, thanks to Jim for persevering with the IT issues, and thanks for Rob in IAM HQ for helping us out with those as well. So without much further ado, I'll hand you over to Orla Newman, who is co-chair of the IAM Munster branch and is asset manager with the ESB. Orla is also having IT issues this morning, so hopefully Orla can hear us and we can hear her.
I can definitely hear you. I hope at this stage you'll be able to hear me now. Is that coming through?
That's coming through. Over to you, Orla.
Okay. Thanks very much. Thanks for that, Owen. Just for those of you that don't know me, quick introduction. As Owen has said, I work with ESB and I'm currently responsible for managing our asset management processes right across our thermal, hydro and renewable generation fleet. So we've really got a strong interest in the whole area of asset management. And I suppose that's how my engagement with IAM and the whole co-chair with Conor on the Munster branch has come about. So firstly, I just want to say thank you to everybody this afternoon who has taken the time to log in and to support this event. As Owen said, it's we had to go virtual given the COVID world that we're living in, but I think it's been great to get people involved and to maintain the support. And I also just want to echo what Owen has said and to thank our two presenters today, Ian and Jim, who've delivered such excellent asset management content. So thanks to both of you, and we really appreciate you sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Myself personally, I found this session extremely informative, and I think it's great to have the opportunity to sustain knowledge sharing, and given the times that we're in. These type of online events are a great way to make sure that we maintain connections with our own colleagues and with people in the wider asset management community, and get the chance to exchange ideas. So I think this session has been really, really valuable, and I hope that you all feel the same way about it. I suppose given the world that we're living in right now, it's definitely our intention to hold another online event in December. I think given the success of today, it's definitely something that's very doable. So we've been thinking about that, and there are 3 potential topics that we would be covering at the next event in December. So they would be around life cycle, asset life cycling, asset reliability, and asset information strategies. So I'd be very interested in getting people's feedback on which of those topics that you would like us to focus at an event that the Munster branch would like to hold in December. So if we could get feedback from you on that, we'd greatly appreciate it. So just to wrap up again now, just want to say thanks to everybody for taking part. Thanks to Conor and Owen and the rest of the committee for all the hard work today. And thanks to everybody for dialing in and participating in this event. And we hope that we can continue to run events like this and continue to support the Munster branch in developing and sharing our asset management knowledge. So thanks very much, everybody.